the shuttle have been documented as more and more people have issues related to what has been came to be known as the death hole. To date, there have been almost 25 near drownings in the last 2 summers because of it. I myself have had an intimate ordeal with it, and no, it wasn't the kind of intimacy that was fun. We have sat and watched and videoed how the water current churns one way inside the hole and then turns around in the reverse and goes in the other direction over and over. The owners of Parcel B have been informed by the state that they are not supposed to land the shuttle on the beach the way they do. They have been told that they have to have a submerged land lease with the state for it to be legal. To date, that has not been applied for, nor has the shuttle stopped. I would like to see it stopped for now, till we figure everything out. Thank you for hearing our voices. Please do something about this before someone, heaven forbid, a child dies because it has been blatantly ignored for so long. I feel like other people have said tonight that we have a decent council that is actually listening to us. All we want for Destin is for not only the people who come here, but the people who live here to be safe. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Shreve, and I owe you an apology. I did find your card. I'm very sorry.
Thank you, Ms. Lejeune. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for that time. City Council, this brings us to the part of the evening where we want to discuss some questions. We want to hear each City Council member's response to 3 specific questions that we will ask, but we're noting tonight that we're sensing quite a lot of unity and a lot of trends in your answers and your discussion already. So when we pose the individual questions, we will ask you each to answer. But if you have a fellow council member who has pretty much spoken what you want to say, it's okay to just say, I concur with council member fill in the blank, rather than go through restating all of those things, just for the interest of time, because we are getting close to the 9 o'clock hour. So we will then try to pull the trends out and try to get some real direction for your city staff. So we'll move into the question time right now. First question, and it will also be up on the board. What total floor area ratio best aligns with the community's vision for Destin? We'll let anyone start. We do want to hear from everyone, even if it is just to concur. Whoever would like to start, please.
It's different in different areas, so it's kind of a big question.
Well, we wanted it to be a little bit open-ended. Maybe you don't agree with the question at all. Maybe there's certain future land use designations specifically that need to be addressed. We just wanted to start. You guys have already been pretty direct, but we just wanted to see how you felt about this recent amendment with the total floor area ratio. Do you like it as it is? Do you want to not use this type of calculation? Do you want the city staff to explore other options?
It needs to be coupled with the intensity and density analysis.
Okay. So you want to see something to determine what is appropriate for these different future land use designations, and not just feeling like you're randomly choosing these 3.0 floor area ratio?
We need clear justifications for whatever's been designated.
Okay. How does everyone else feel about that?
I'll take a stab at it. I kind of like the approach that they took with the FAR for the simple reason that it provided for open space, green space, setbacks, and it worked it into one formula for having to do that. The old situation was that you had one rule for commercial and one rule for residential and all like that. So I kind of like that approach to it. I'm not sure, as Mr. Destin said, that we've latched on to the right FAR for the areas that they're located in, and the justification probably wasn't there. So I agree with that part.
So re-examining the numbers that are currently designated for each of the future land use designations and what's appropriate. Okay.
I would add to that is making sure it's compatible with existing structures and buildings, whatever they might be, depending on the area, and also to ensure that we're not overcompensating in that area because of the takeaway from height or density.
Can you explain that just a little bit more, overcompensating?
It's my opinion that in some zones, because the height had to be reduced from what perhaps it once was or what might have been expected, that it was sort of a, well, we've had to take this away, let's give you more FAR to try to compensate for a loss in a different
Okay, I
area.
gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so looking at everything kind of comprehensively, yes, we have the height and reduction, but we also need to consider overall the overall bulk and mass of the structure. Okay. Anyone else? Good. Okay. All right, then we'll move on then. Okay, this goes back to the second topic. Once again, it's a little open-ended. We already started to hear some direct issues as they relate, but what would you describe as a preferred multimodal transportation district based upon the community's vision for the city of Destin?
I'd like to see us do away with it, multimodal altogether. I'm like some other council mentions, it's not working. I don't think it's for Destin, in my opinion.
I might say that from my standpoint, I might disagree with complete removal of the multimodal plan. Remove the worst parts, the parts that we know are not actually going to work. I echoed a bit of Lee's sentiment, which was if we're going, I don't mind the vision that Kanan offered of the multimodal uses of all the, but if we can actually practically get our residents to want to go down there, but none of that's going to happen until we've slowed traffic down to where we've got safe ways to cross the highway, until we have the large pedestrian walkways that are properly landscaped, until we have the storefronts oriented correctly. And so get rid of the things that just patently just smack of, that don't make any sense. With regards to the parking, with regards to the bike credits, with regards to all the stuff that basically gets a developer a credit to cram more than what is really going to feasibly be able to be handled from a parking and density standpoint, under the guise that, well, people are going to be biking here, so that's not a big deal. So I like it. We need to promote that, but it's going to have to come incrementally. We got to get rid of this stuff that just doesn't make sense. Otherwise, I'd say leave it alone.
Okay, so how does other council members feel about that incremental approach that?
I think removing the bike credits is not a bad, the allowances for parking, because what's the point of having bike credits if you can't ride your bike in Destin? Because you can't. And if you do, you're crazy. At least on 98, Holiday Crystal Beach is actually a little bit different in that regard. They are pedestrian friendly. But the South Harbor mixed-use district, the harbor area in general, we're not even close.
Okay.
I concur with Mr. Destin and Mr. Morgan on this. The other thing is, and Mr. Destin brought this up, is the adjustment of the speed on 98. We have I know a couple of years back I requested that we try to get the state to reduce it from 35 to 25 from the bridge, at least to Main Street, because that's one of the contentious areas. First we were told no, then we're told yeah, it's possible, because with the sheriff's department, I've talked to them. People forget that it says speed limit, and then 9 times out of 10, if it says 35, they go 45. So the whole point is, if we get it down to 25, at least they'll go 35, is what law enforcement's telling me. And I mean, be strict on it. Fort Walton Beach has had 98 from the Brooks Bridge side up to I think Memorial Parkway at 25, and their deputy, their police department will ticket you if they catch you. I mean, it's not all the time they did get caught, but I think reducing the speed limit on 98 is one thing that will help us in the long run. And like I said, I agree with Mr. Destin and Mr. Morgan. We need to get rid of the stuff that's not working.
I feel like the multimodal plan that's in effect is basically just a way that we can allow more trips or more cars to be, coming into the area, because we say we got a multimodal plan, but the multimodal plan, in my opinion, is not working. And I think it's a lot of times, in a lot of cases, we waste a lot of money with it. I'm not willing to totally throw it out, but I am willing to look at and see what we can do to maybe not provide so much of a benefit to the trips that we generate, and it's all determined with that as far as the trips go. And I think the trips that we have and the way we consider our multimodal stuff is all kind of figured together and allows more development. So I just want to make sure that we consider the fact that our multimodal plan really should not be an incentive or should not give any developer, in my opinion, very much leeway to overextend what we already have. So that's my opinion.
Well, yeah, the multimodal plan, first of all, there's more to Destin than the South Harbor. We've got a real nice place here that we're taking one area of the city and we're stamping the rest of the city as being incapable of dealing with these problems. But in the area I live in is perfect for multimodal. I wouldn't think of, it's great for walking, it's great for bicycles, and you see a lot of that in those areas. So I think multimodal clearly is working in parts of the city. And I think the progress that's being made, say even on Calhoun, on some of the projects that are underway there, to provide access to the parks that are going in there is going to be an outstanding example of multimodal. So I think refinements are due. I can stand that, and I think maybe a few of the examples that are brought up, but I don't think you're going to throw the whole thing out just for a few problems.
I completely agree. I mean, we all forward-thinking, happening cities are doing everything they can to encourage people to get out of their cars, to walk, to bike. The point is in our busiest corridor, we're just not equipped to do that. So why give allowances until we're prepared from an infrastructure standpoint? That doesn't mean one of my highest priorities is redeveloping the infrastructure on 98 to make it not as dangerous and to make it more pedestrian friendly. But until we're there, it's like what came first, the chicken or the egg? Why give these credits if you can't even ride your bike on the Harbor Boardwalk? So where are you going to ride your bike around their parking lot? Common sense.
Anyone else? Okay, so it sounds like the multimodal transportation district needs to be seriously reconsidered. We don't want to throw it out. Some areas it's working, but especially in the South Harbor area, that we need to seriously consider some of the provisions that are offering incentives and bonuses, because we don't currently have the infrastructure to support reducing the parking and having other people use other modes of transportation right now.
And when the infrastructure's there, continue the allowances. But until we can get people out of their cars, if ever.
Okay. And so the third question very closely relates to that second question. So it says, how would you describe effective parking standards for the city of Destin, specifically considering the minimum and maximum requirements, outdoor seating capacity, design standards, and aesthetics? So this gets a little more detailed. So I'll open the floor.
Okay, I'll go again. Like I said, the Canyon Plan, I like the fact that, there are parking standards that take some of the parking off of the front view of the actual highway and puts it near the interior. So the storefronts, I mean, that's the only way really you can get a pedestrian-friendly sort of causeway that goes up and down. I like that, that's good. But at the end of the day, I just have a big problem. You can't build something bigger than what you have with regards to parking and imagine that it's gonna be okay. So we need to go over to minimum parking at least. We gotta get rid of the maximum parking and the outdoor seating capacity, how that ever was tied into your parking or not, just the fact that somebody's sitting without a roof over their head, somehow they didn't drive there with a vehicle, that is the craziest thing I have ever heard of in my life. I'll go further than him. That makes no sense, but just makes it very convenient for folks that want to build a restaurant that don't have the parking for it. So, other than that, the design standards, the aesthetics, if we can get the developers to do it, I have no heartburn over that.
How does the rest of the council feel about those two factors, the outdoor seating and then not having the maximum, getting rid of that? Is that what you, okay?
And just to clarify, the maximum parking requirement's saying that if you can't have too much.
Correct.
And it's,
because I mean, this is crazy. I know where that came from, because when they adopted the multimodal plan, the plan was that if we go and deprive people of parking in the South Harbor, they'll be forced to use our parking garages. But we were already short 1,500 parking spaces when we adopted the plan. That should have provided plenty of impetus to want to use the parking garages. My fear is that was just shoved in there to maximize your ability to develop your parcel with the most amount of profitable space, which is not parking. And that's what it was there for. And so we've got to get rid of that. It doesn't make any sense.
I think this is an issue that overlaps into so many other issues that it's hard to correct one aspect without correcting other aspects that are contributing factors. Parking's going to be a problem as long as we've got people that are trying to get down there and go to the different venues and don't want to cross 98. So we're working on the pedestrian crosswalks, and that's a great start. That'll help encourage people, I hope, to park on the north side. But you've got to take into consideration the fact that it's such a zoo just driving down there that people almost tend to give up before they find a parking space. And there's so many, it's hard to really isolate one solution, in my opinion, because there's so many things you have to tackle that are part of it. So I really don't have a good answer other than we need to start by really what they've already said in terms of minimum parking and maximum parking, and then looking at other potential drivers meaning not actual physical car drivers, but items that are contributing to it. So it's such a difficult topic and overarching. So I know I didn't add a whole lot, but it's my thoughts.
What we did was we created a good thing with the boardwalk, but we didn't follow it up with the proper infrastructure of where do we put the people parking to use the boardwalk. And that was one of our main problems. And I'll say, like I said, the parking garages that the city said we would try to work on and build on the north side to get the people to park on the north side, then figure out a way to get them from the north side to the south side safely is part of the problem. So and that goes without also with what we're asking the people if they were going to do a restaurant for outdoor seating and stuff. Parking's always a premium, and I think we just said it. We never have enough parking, no matter what we do, to do that, because we do need to have the parking for the employees. We do need to have the parking for the tourists that are coming to visit us, and we have to figure out a way to do that infrastructure that we failed to do when we get the boardwalk. Boardwalk's a great thing. We also want to continue that boardwalk underneath the bridge and connect it to the north side, and then go on down further. And originally the plan was to put it at Chatham's family's that was the dead end, was going to be at Chatham's family's restaurant there.
Thanks.
And so, sorry, that was the plan.
Not anymore.
Way back when, you were still little, you know. But the problem, like I said, exists. We have to figure out some way to get people to park on the north side and make that parking. And that also goes back to, if we're going to allow Emerald Grands and things like that on the south side, how do we do that parking for the facility and also for the restaurants and the other businesses that are incorporated in that thing? So it's going to be a tough issue all the way around. But yeah, the effective parking is, you know, the requirements for outdoor seating. Yeah, we probably need to look at that, because everybody wants to be outdoors and indoors at the same time. They like the atmosphere, depending on the cool breezes, of being outdoors. And possibly, you know, there's restaurants that have exceeded what they need. But it all comes back to this council and previous councils who promised certain things that we haven't been able to come up with because of either money or various other reasons. And so it's a kind of a hand-in-hand thing with the developers and that want to build and us to honor our part of the deal. And if that requires us to say, stop, wait, we need to look at things before we allow any more building, then yeah, okay, fine. But the only thing I worry about is the potential of the city's finances being strained, you know, what we're spending the taxpayers' dollars on. I don't, you know, and nothing against the lawyers in the room, I don't want to be paying legal fees out of the citizens' tax dollars for something we may lose. You know, if we lose the battle because they find the loopholes that we didn't find. So, but yes, we do need to address the parking and get the people on both sides.
Don't get me wrong, I am all for parking garages, and I think public parking is something that we desperately need. My issue, though, is that these parking lots aren't being used for the public, first of all, because they can't cross 98 without fear for their lives. But secondly, it's not for them, it's for employees of irresponsible businesses and an irresponsible parking code that has created this parking problem in the first place. So until we fix that, I'm not going to support spending millions of dollars of taxpayers' money on more parking for employees. For business, they have a responsibility to their employees to provide parking for them, and they're not doing it. And until they do, I'm not going to subsidize. You know, I get this big rap for being the socialist Democrat, the token Democrat of the bunch up here. Well, what we're talking about is socialized parking. We're subsidizing parking. And yet,
that was your dad's legacy.
Well, it's my legacy too, because I'm a proud Democrat. But this is the old-fashioned. We did it the old-fashioned way, where we were successful in business and we reinvested our money to make our business bigger and better. We're not asking the city to bail us out with a parking lot for some outdoor dining loophole that. And there is a shred of logic behind the outdoor dining loophole. I get it. Sometimes it rains and people aren't going to be sitting out there. Sometimes it's cold in the winter. People aren't going to be sitting out there. But that's not when the parking's an issue in the winter. So all in all, you know.
That was a great speech.
Thank you very much. I mean, and it's the truth. But it is subsidized parking. At the same time, I do know we owe an obligation in exchange for the easements that were given to us by the property owners on the harbor. And I'm not against parking on the north side of the highway, but I just can't support it until we fix some major issues that have created this parking issue in the first place, which I think we're on the right track of doing. I think we've achieved a consensus up here of doing that, and I hope we have. And if not, I'll continue having enough parking at my businesses, and y'all can, I don't know, but
Okay, I agree with Mr. Marler's comments about under the bridge, and the reason why is that's a normal route that people could take to get to the north side and to access parking on the north side. The other thing is, parking is like eating the elephant. I mean, you got to start somewhere and start at the beginning, and I think there are ways that we can do that. We can have a short-range plan and a long-range plan. Short-range plan is identify every piece of property or land. For example, on Cybert, you've got 100-foot right-of-ways, And there are areas over there, maybe you could do the same thing that the businesses are doing. I don't know whether it's legal or not, but maybe the city could lease some property somewhere and put it in the short term. But the long-term plan would probably be more complicated, involving the garages. And I think that has to be probably worked out on a private-public partnership, which I think is doable. But I think the parking thing is probably the biggest nut to crack we've got.
I'd like to ask a question on the process here. Are we going to take all these suggestions that we've talked about tonight? Staff going to come back with something to propose to us? Is that what's going to happen? Are we going to have another workshop on this, or what?
What we're trying to do by the time we walk out of the building tonight is address these three main issues and see, can we have a directive for staff, an action? Or have you decided that we actually are going to need more information before we can give clear direction? City staff is ready to take direction. We just need clear direction. So what we can do and move into right now is look at these three things and try to put together, do we have a consensus of a direction for staff? So let's go back to the first one. Are we ready to move on to that? Do you want to address parking anymore?
One other thing on parking, because Chatham brought it up and he's kind of right in one way. When we permit things like restaurants and stuff for parking, we're talking overall parking. And I think probably one thing needs to be addressed is, if we're doing that, parking for the customer, parking for the employees. You know, how many employees do you have? How many, because I think that would probably solve it. And I don't know, maybe we're barking up a wrong tree there in one way, that it wouldn't be the right thing to do, but he's got a good point. The employees should be allowed, because you have various employees who have various ailments that, in my case, I have bad knees, and it's hard for me to walk across the street, and in some cases, and walk in some of the things I do.
My point is, these businesses don't have property across the street.
Well,
So
I know what I'm saying.
Where are
is,
they parking?
That's what I'm saying, is that maybe one of the things we need to look at is, on the same side, on the job site, parking for the employee, parking for the customer at the same time. I know that's kind of weird if we have to, incorporate that somehow. I'm trying to word it right and I can't do it, but to incorporate it somehow, that's got to be part of your parking requirements, is that you have to give a certain amount of parking for your employees, a certain amount of parking for your clientele.
Thank you. Anything else on parking, or can we go back and try to recap, get some direction? Okay, let's go to the first topic, which was total floor area ratio. I think some of the trends that we heard tonight were we need more objective clarifications of what those are instead of so much subjective language. We heard a lot of comment about reinsertion of council into those decisions. Caitlin, anything else that you would want to put into that statement? Or council, anything else you think that would be consensus in helping us put together a statement of action for your city staff?
I think that we're going to have probably one or two more of these at least, but if you guys can come up with the FAR for each zone district and help us understand exactly what is going to happen if somebody met this maximum, what could happen on some of these properties, what are we really going to be looking at, and come back to us with that information. That it's easy, it's just a number for most of us up here. And so if we can actually materialize it into what would be the actual effect if we went with that number in this zone, what would we get? Or what different variations could we get? And if that information is presented to us, we'd have a much more educated response. I'd imagine that, yes, that's probably something that's appropriate for this area, or maybe not, and maybe we should go something lower. Or maybe there's room, we can go higher, I don't know, so.
Do you,
that reflect a consensus of the council, this direction to city staff, for clarification of this?
Yeah, I would concur with that. We were told that, that the comp plan that we've adopted was based off the Tier 2 system. Yeah, sort of, kind of. But the this FAR is increased, in some cases is doubled. So it's really not tier 2, it's, almost tier 3 or tier 2 plus. And, I mean, we've heard a lot about the Emerald Grand, that it's just a huge building, nobody likes it, because it's so big. And then, but everybody says that's tier 2. So what do we want?
So you want actual
And if they-
visualizations and comparisons of what these floor area ratios are going to look like, and also maybe analysis of why we choose the floor area ratios that we do, or that have been chosen for each of the land use designations. Total floor area ratio, I should say.
Yeah, I would, 'cause I mean, as right now, this comp plan that stands, they can build even more than what the Emerald Grand is, if that's tier 2, and the FAR has increased.
Yeah, I mean, we're getting at, I mean, we'll have lower buildings. We're saying we don't have tier 3 anymore, but we'll get tier 3 impacts. And that's what we're trying to avoid, I think. And if that means we've got to bring everything down to what was previously a tier 1 level, spread things out, and then figure out a way to where council can be reinserted if anything goes past that, then maybe that's something we need to really seriously explore. But I know that gets far specific for council consensus, and that's for you guys perhaps just to pitch back, and we'll go back and forth. But, that's my feeling on it.
Yeah, that's something I was going to kind of mention, is that maybe we don't have the specific answers or the solutions right now, but if we get that direction of, we know that we don't like this, let's please bring before us other options, and let's visualize, let us see, based upon what's approved right now, what is that going to look like? And then you guys can go from there.
I was going to say perhaps one thought, because the measurement of height, there's some discussion on, well, if it's within the roof line, it's not going to count. If it's a parking structure below, it might not count. If it's below ground level, it might not. Perhaps we go with a height, the highest point. The highest point of the structure is a maximum of 100 feet, as opposed to, your structure can have 10 stories of 100 feet, which then allows for all the little extras. Okay. That's just a thought.
So with the total floor area ratio, also, in addition, how are we measuring height and what's included in that height?
I hate to see the focus totally on, I don't know, tier 3 structures. Basically, I think I'm assuming there's a consensus that our infrastructure is overloaded. We have got to focus on how to reduce intensity and density, how we can better quality, larger units, and get, whether you're talking about subdividing individual residential lots to increase the number of houses in a residential area, or a high-rise condo, or a mini hotel, no matter what section you're looking at, somehow or another we're going to have to examine the effect of that structure on density and intensity.
I concur.
I might also add, go a little bit longer. I think the thing we all struggle with and probably need real direction on, if Destin is truly about 95% built out, and you're talking about redevelopment on part of it, you need to try to figure out how to take that same focus, and can you retroactively apply it to structures that already exist. A restaurant that only has 18 parking spaces, you can't stretch the lot out and make more land at this point, but is there some method of trying to implement funding for other parking areas or something from structures that are definitely do not have enough parking or whatever, do not have the proper infrastructure, however they slipped in, is is there any possibility of also, instead of applying it all just to the 5% that hasn't been developed and what's going to be redeveloped, can it be spread over those that may have abused the process in the past?
I think if I'm right in what you said, Mayor, that you're saying basically that you're not gonna go back and make people that has done things differently or done things by what the city has allowed, you're not gonna make them go back and retro anything, but if there's any more development in that particular piece of property, they would have to come into compliance. Is that what you're saying?
I think practically that's what I'm saying, because I don't think there's any way to go back
Yeah,
any farther than that. But if there was a way to, one of the structures they described that had 18 parking places, yes, if there was I don't get a vote, I don't get a second, so I don't, I can't really back anything I say up. But if I had my choice and we had to raise money to build a parking garage, those would be the first people I'd look for.
Oh, I agree. But what I'm saying is, you're not speaking of going back and retroactive and making people do things that were approved to do in the past, right? I mean, you're not talking about that.
I'm pretty sure the courts would never
All
allow
right.
that
Well,
to
I
happen.
just wanted to make sure that's not where you were going, and I wouldn't have a problem with it either way. But I'm just asking.
Is it fair to say that in addition to floor area ratio, we need to be looking at intensity and density issues as it relates to redevelopment in terms of subdividing property, and how we're going to control that? Okay.
One final thing with redevelopment, and I hate to bring the H word in of hurricane. One thing, I know that one thing we have already, if I'm not correct, is if a structure is over 50% destroyed, they cannot build back the same way that they were before. I believe I might be right. Scott can probably correct me or not. That was one thing we did a long time ago. If a structure was over such as and that's the one thing I think, because that's basically redevelopment in a sense, because should we get one of those storms that we really don't want, but we talk about it. Thank you, Chad, I'm not going wood. The problem would be then we have to come back and then we're looking at redevelopment stage, because I mean, a Category 5 could pretty well devastate Destin to that point where we're looking at a complete redevelopment, and then we could implement a lot of different aspects that we're talking about today, which it would include the height and all the other stuff. And so I know that sounds weird from one standpoint, but that's something to look at on any comp plan that we do, is that, living in the area that we live in, any natural disaster could happen that could hurt us, and that would be a good opportunity in one way to make Destin what some of the people seem to think that they want Destin to be like instead of what it's like today. I know that sounds funny, but it's the truth.
I think another thing we've kind of hit all around without specifying is maybe variances, and the fact that a lot of the variances that are issued completely change the face of something that was previously approved or reviewed or agreed upon. And I don't know if that's something council's interested in looking at, perhaps changing that process or disallowing. I mean, I don't know, but I know variances account for a lot of different growth and development that perhaps was not originally intended.
And we have an opportunity to deny that if we don't like it.
I think we've covered a lot of the same ground a little bit. Does staff feel like they've got some direction on this one, right?
I think if you give us any more, you're going to melt our brains.
Yeah, I had a feeling. Okay, fair enough.
All right, moving on. And we've already talked about this, pretty specifically, but let's just go through it one last time about the preferred multimodal transportation district. What I was hearing, it sounds like you seriously want staff to review some of the incentives that are currently in there, mostly as it relates to parking, that because we don't have the infrastructure currently for the other modes that we need to kind of rein it in a little bit on that.
Yeah, can I ask a question here? Whenever, you're right, yeah. Whenever we talk about the multimodal system, it's my understanding that we get credit for that multimodal system to allow certain developments to maybe not have so many parking spaces, or allow developments to, go past what our road trips or whatever may be, because we're considering the multimodal system. So, when we look at this whole multimodal system, all these things need to be factored in, and I want to make sure that we are factoring in all these things. So,
Are you talking about the scoring?
well, it's my understanding that whenever right now, considering a multimodal system, if you do a trip report, or if you do a traffic report, and you say, okay, we're at 95% capacity, we maybe really are at 105% capacity because we're considering multimodal, and that gives you some credit. So those things are very complicated, and that's my understanding of that. So I may be wrong on it. So.
No, actually, you are correct. So the multimodal transportation district allowed you to have more capacity than FDOT provided, so you could continue developing and going through your comprehensive plan. It was a way of supporting the map amendments and the changes to the comp plan back in 2005.
In that, if we're not truly utilizing the multimodal system, then it's really not a fair, in my opinion, it's not a fair trade. And so with that, I think we need to look at everything that we've got going as far as the multimodal system, and it's got to be a fair and honest trade, or it's not fair to the citizens that are having to deal with the traffic and everything else. So, with that, I think we need to look at everything that has to do with the multimodal system, and it may be that we can't give credit unless it's actually a functioning multimodal system without, all it is numbers then. We're just playing with numbers. And so, for areas that we've already, exceeded our trips or our road capacity as far as vehicles and things like that, and we're offering incentives for something that's not being utilized, then it's no good. Absolutely no good.
Correct. Yeah, the incentives that were part of it were the parking reduction to try to get less of those trips than what originally would be needed, and have, more people walking and biking in that mixture of use. Just over time, because of the slowdown, it just hasn't come to quite fruition of what we thought it would be at that time in 2005. So there are some methods, and we have recommended some reevaluation of how that would be implemented.
Do the other council members understand what we're talking about here?
I think so.
Completely.
I think logic would dictate, before you give allowances for multimodal, that you need to actually have that infrastructure first.
We designed it to start getting some of that infrastructure, and that's why they had that form, that multimodal concurrency form, because otherwise there wasn't enough funding. You couldn't use impact fees or those other methods to build that infrastructure. So we were hoping that was going to balance over time. As development came in, we were going to provide that infrastructure, and it would really start coming through, but the development started slowing down. So it outpaced itself, and then some of the development found ways around it. They would be smaller or different methods, so they didn't have to pay as much. So it just didn't quite match up to get the infrastructure.
Yeah, and I know we've done some work like on Kelly Street and Old Destin. And that's fine and well, but again, where it impacts us the most is 98, where we've done absolutely no work. So why continue this at least on Highway 98 if the infrastructure is just not there?
You're getting credit for something that's not there. That's
what
the
I'm
problem.
saying. And in Old Destin, I'm all for it. Nicer sidewalks, perfect. But where we're given the credits, where it's affecting us the most, is dangerous.
It just seems, to me, it seems like this multimodal revolves around traffic. But we don't have a traffic problem on Benning. We don't have one on Kelly. We don't have it on Cyber Calhoun. We don't have it on Indian Trail. But, no, we got 10-foot wide sidewalks down these streets, or 8-foot wide. The problem we got is the traffic problem's on 98.
And the multimodal district, that's why it was expanded not just on 98 to look at those other corridors to create a system. And that's why we do the monitoring report and the view to make sure that we're not completely breaking the system. We do realize it's congested. It has been congested. But with the growth and with the changes, we've been able to maintain that with other roadway improvements, intersection improvements, and bicycles and sidewalk lanes. So even though it's not directly on 98, the other improvements off of it has helped 98 maintain its level even over the past 10 years. Now we're just at the stage where we got to keep moving it forward.
Way 98 maintain what?
Basically maintain about the same amount of traffic. So even with the growth that's occurred, not just in Destin, but outside, we've maintained about the same level of traffic on 98 for the past 10 years. And that's with more traffic using Calhoun and a lot of the other parallel roadways to get around, especially the locals, and providing some of those multimodal improvements so they have those other options than taking their car, better sidewalks to get to. Even if it's just the north side of 98, they're still using other modes to get there. And that's what the MMTV has provided over the past 10 years. Still just maintaining the traffic, but trying to make it better.
That's the plan, but it's not happened. So.
Right. I mean, it's kept it at its same level. It hasn't increased to the degree that it was forecasted to. If nothing happened and the development came in, traffic would have kept increasing, and then we would have had still the same plan that the Department of Transportation has, which would be the 6-lane 98. This was a plan to help keep 98 down to 4 lanes as a smaller, safer corridor so you could have walking. If not, then we would have been dealing with Florida Department of Transportation's roadway and them wanting to widen it to make sure that they had enough capacity to fly.
So getting back to the direction, you brought up the credits. Do you feel that that's part of it that needs to be reevaluated?
I think the whole system needs to be reevaluated, to be honest with you. And the whole multimodal system needs to be reevaluated, especially the credit that's given. And, if it's not actually helping traffic on 98, then, I don't know what we're doing, so.
Their study said it hasn't gotten worse.
Well, doing away with multimodal is not going to reduce traffic.
Didn't say getting rid of it, I'm just saying,
I mean, what the gentleman just said was that Highway 98 traffic hasn't gotten worse, which I guess is right, but the conundrum I'm in is it's compounding another problem, and that's parking. At the same time, I really want us to be a multimodal city, and that's what all good cities are becoming. So, it's a conundrum, and do away with the allowances, keep the multimodal program. I don't.
Weren't we the first multimodal city in Florida? Or we were sort of setting a precedent at the time? And now others have kind of surpassed us and had more success, and we're still kind of creeping along, for lack of a better phrase.
The thing about multimodal is that it works better in more dense urban environments. And so some of the bigger cities can implement it more easily than Destin can. That's one of the challenges, is that, that's when we were talking about the development not arriving that we thought would arrive. That would have meant parking garages, that would have been public-private partnerships for parking garages and better crosswalks, and all of the features that you see in the multimodal plan would have come about more quickly, albeit along with additional development too.
And that's
the thing is, you need the additional urban development to support a multimodal system.
That's funded solely by impact fees?
It's funded by indirect developer improvements as you go. And so most of the multimodal features that are indicated in the design criteria are all things that developers are required to build as part of their development plan. And so those things are the things you need to keep in the plan, because those are going to make the multimodal come about. The things like the location of parking, the hardscape, the sidewalks, all those things, making a more pedestrian-oriented building facade, all those things Whatever you do with the credits, up to you, but keep the design criteria because those things are going to make multimodal come about.
Doesn't the developer have to pay something toward the multimodal plan during the process
They
of
do.
development?
The way the system works is if the developer can't meet all of the multimodal specifications, the developer can basically pay a fee to not have to comply with everything that's multimodal.
So they pay a fee to have less parking spaces?
They pay a fee to not have multimodal designs such as a pedestrian-oriented facade or additional hardscape improvements such as benches and things like that.
But they pay a fee to have less parking spaces?
Yes, it's my understanding, for instance, that when the McDonald's was built, they didn't want to have to comply with the multimodal system, so they just paid the entire, they paid a multimodal fee and not have to do multimodal.
With the price tags of these developments, that could just be built in as a cost of the business, and you will never get the end result that we want.
That's right. So, I mean, if you don't want people to be able to do that, then just do away with the fee buyout and do away with the credits and require that they build multimodal as part of the development plan. Right.
Is everyone in agreement with that?
By the way, I made it sound overly simplistic, so it's going to be a lot tougher than that to do.
Next meeting.
All right. Well, I appreciate that. Okay. I think we're maybe beating a dead horse a little bit here, but with the parking, have we identified that we really need to have staff look and reconsider some of these minimum maximums and the outdoor seating issues?
Yes.
Pretty straightforward? Okay. Alrighty then.
But
Great.
May I just say to staff, I don't think outdoor seating needs to be held necessarily to the exact same standard as indoor seating, but it does need to be higher than it is now. We don't need to be opening.
Mm-hmm. It needs to be
businesses.
incorporated somehow.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I think we got that.
I think we have our direction to staff on our 3 items. Is everyone, we're good there? Because if we're good there, I think we're going to call that a success and get ready to close here. We want to thank everyone for your input and your time. And Mr. Mayor, we would like to turn it over to you, allow you to close, please.